so our last presenter then is Kate O'Connell. Kate is the Research Support Officer in UCC in Cork University Hospital, and she's going to talk about survivorship studies.
Thank you.
Kate, thank you. So, yeah, the green button. Yeah.
Yep, you can see that. I can see it here too. Thank you very much for having me here today. I'm mainly going to talk about an example of a survivorship study. As I say, I'm a research support officer on the LYSA study, and that's finished. I'm gone back into clinical practice, which is actually something I think we may discuss along the way as well. We are very grateful for our funders, because without the funders we would not be here, and that is the thing about these survivorship studies. Really, there isn't money in them, so we need funders. So the Irish Cancer Society, Breakthrough Cancer Research and the NCCP funded this study. We also are so grateful to our patient advocates. Without them, we wouldn't have a study. We had 6 representatives who were post-breast and gynae cancer treatment, and we had a big group of stakeholders, including clinical experts, academic experts, community partners, namely Ark House in Cork and Recovery Haven in Kerry, and members of the wider MDT group, which are dietitians, physios, social workers, OTs, and other interested parties. Did it change there? Not here. So then the LYSA story. So it's an investigator-initiated trial. I suppose I was the nurse on the study, but the co-PIs were Professor Roisin Connolly and Professor Josephine Haggerty, who you'd all be very aware of. And we were just lucky, I suppose. Roisin Connolly came to Ireland at the same time as the Irish Cancer Society put out a grant call for the Women's Health Initiative. And within a few weeks of her coming, we'd applied for the grant and were successful. We very much based our study on the National Cancer Strategy, and I know we've mentioned today that really that hasn't moved on as much as we wanted it to move on, but there's some things that we did in our study that are pivotal to the survivorship cohort. So I suppose that strategy was the first strategy to identify survivorship cohort as a priority, so that was the first, and it made 4 recommendations for survivors. And within our study, we met all these recommendations. Again, they're only recommendations that the study has met. They're not in practice for everyone yet, so we have a long way to go. Recommendation 40 was that every patient get a treatment summary and care plan, which we have worked on, and I am working on trying to get this into practice as well now at the moment, coming out of the study. Recommendation 41 was a needs assessment, which was done in 2018 and 19 by Professor Josephine Haggerty, and that was the catalyst for this study. Recommendation 42 was development of patient pathways, and they were to be shared with other healthcare professionals in primary care. So in other words, they weren't just for the study, they are available for everyone else to use. And recommendation 43 was that we developed some survivorship programs in primary care and through our voluntary and charity sectors. And really our jobs in the hospital is signposting to a lot of these survivorship programs. Some of them are there, some of them aren't. We need to develop a few more. So the study, the main objective of our study was to evaluate the feasibility of introducing a women's survivorship clinic incorporating symptom management to electronic patient-reported outcome collection. So it was a complex intervention into routine follow-up care in patients with early-stage hormone receptor-positive breast and gynecological cancer post-primary curative therapy. So that was our main aim. We also had secondary objectives. But we were not powered, as Siobhana said there. You can't wait for the thousands of patients to power your randomised controlled trial, or we'd never have any results. But we do have secondary objectives, looking at their symptoms, exploring self-care agency, evaluating endocrine therapy adherence, looking at the patient and clinician satisfaction with the service, resource and economic impact of the service, and the impact of a dietetic intervention. It was randomised controlled in design, but again, not powered to show exactly 2 differences between the 2 arms. It was for our early stage breast cancer and endometrial and cervical cancer. They had to be within 12 months of completing curative treatment. They had to have access to the internet. And we were aiming to recruit 200 people, which we did, 200 women. So the randomised controlled design, they were both consented, randomised on a 1-to-1 basis by their disease site, and they both had baseline assessments, the exact same baseline assessments, checking quality of life and symptoms, and they both attended the survivorship clinic, which is where they met a nurse and a dietitian. At this stage, that's where they separated. So one became an active comparator in that they weren't a true control because they got more than standard practice, and an experimental arm, which completed surveys every two months on their symptoms and the quality of life, and then they got a tailored, patient-centred pathway on that symptom by a nurse and a dietitian as needed. And then back together at the end, we brought them both back together. We brought them back into the clinic. We assessed their quality of life and their symptoms again at that point. And they were signposted to any other services that they could as well at that point. So I suppose our learning points, and some of these, you'll say some of us know about them now. I suppose when we started this study, it was in the middle of COVID, and we also had a cyber attack. So there were two big things that changed the way we were doing some of our approaches, I suppose. So we had a virtual informed consent and clinic visits. So the clinic visits, they had to come at the beginning and the very end, and that was because for the dietitian to do baseline measurements and things like that, but the rest of it was done either video call or phone call. So anything in between for our control was done remotely. Data management, we had a hybrid trial master file. We used serial electronic patient reported outcomes, so they were done for the patients every 2 months, and then after each survey, if they triggered, they had access to a nurse or a dietitian. We developed a colour-coded trigger list for clinical practice, so out of all these symptoms, there was over 20 symptoms assessed. Then we had a one-page printout for the clinician, which anything was red, we had to deal with. Anything that was green, they were fine, it didn't need any intervention. And we also had a purple, which is anything that had increased from baseline that we needed to have clinical judgment with the nurse. It is very patient-focused and individualised care, so all your care was determined by your answers to your surveys, and it was nurse-led, so it was a nurse-led clinic. The dietetic was an individualized nutrition counselling, so it was very specific to the patient, and this became very important. I suppose a lot of women going through breast cancer in particular tend to put on weight, not lose weight, and we have this whole idea of everyone needs to be looked after from a weight management point of view, but also we need to look after them from a lifestyle point of view at the other side. The PPI advice was very important throughout. We had patient advocates from the very infancy, so from our first grant application, and those advocates came with us throughout the whole project. We also became a 2-site study, so thanks to Veronica and Galway, they joined us during the study, and again, that wasn't without its, I suppose, trials in that we were going through 2 different sites, which we do ethics, things like that. And again, I think we'll talk about that in a while. If we could make that process seamless, we could have had patients throughout the country on this study. Feasibility results, we're going to be presenting feasibility results in ASCO this year. And also, I think the very important thing is team science. This was a really collaborative approach. So it started with our patients, and they were brought with us. There was me, the nurse, there was Katie, the dietitian. Our 2 PIs were the experts from a research point of view. We then had biostatisticians. We had academic research dietitians. We had nurses, liaison nurses, gynae nurses. We had loads of other clinical experts, including Seamus, leading into this project. So it was a real collaborative piece. And I think that has carried through the whole time with it, really, and that's very important. We hope that some of our data will inform survivorship care in Ireland. As I said from the strategy, a lot of those things are things that we can do, but again, like electronic records and things like that would make a lot of this much more simple. We propose a full-scale randomised controlled trial to look at actually the between-arm differences. There is suggestions that there is differences between the 2 arms, but we do need to power it more, so we would be looking more national and international. As I say, more results and dissemination is to follow, and in ASCO, if any of you are there, I will be presenting on the feasibility findings. I suppose an outcome that has come of the study is that through the NCCP, there was 2 posts developed in CUH and St Vincent's for Women's Health Initiative clinical nurse specialists. So on the ground, we have an actual output already of this study. I have taken up the position in CUH, and I'm now working to try and get what I did in the study available to the patients on the ground. There's more information there on the study if you want, and I'm around if anyone wants to chat.